Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Johnson Wagner, joined alongside by my good friend Brendon de Jonge. We're going to take a look back on the season that has been and a look ahead towards the year's final major, the Open Championship, the FedEx Cup playoffs, the Ryder Cup, and more. All this coming up next.
Think this is only a grip?
It's only my sole connection to this.
It's only in my hands on every single shot.
It's an extra 2 yards of carry when it matters most.
Yeah, only a grip.
Mine are only golf pride.
Respect the grip.
With that, Brendon, where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start at the very beginning of the season. We saw that exciting finish, Max Homa chipping in, Danny Willett missing that very short putt to get into the playoff. And, the excitement hasn't really stopped there. It's been a great season so far.
It certainly has. My favorite part about that Fortinet Championship, him winning and then going straight to the President's Cup from Napa. I think Davis Love met him at the airport at 3 a.m. on Monday morning or something like that. And, speaking of President's Cup, I know that's near and dear to your heart. I felt like this year was a bit kind of given a black eye leading into it with guys going over to play the Live Tour, but it turned out to be an awesome event. Like, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, it was an awesome event, but I think you hit the nail on the head there. You can't help but think if a Cam Smith had been thrown into the mix there. I mean, obviously an Abe Answer, a couple other guys like that, what it could have been. You know, the internationals made a great run the last couple days to make it somewhat close. I don't think the result was ever really in question, but made it a little bit close. But still, as you say, it did. It turned out into a great event. And really, kind of a coming out party for Tom Kim, so to speak. I mean, I know he won the Wyndham before, but I think as far as a President's Cup goes, I think he earned a ton of fans from the U.S. side, playing as well as he did at Quail, and with the passion that he showed, fist pumping his way around, and would go on later in the fall to win his second event in Vegas. Like a wonderful start to his PGA Tour year. Yeah, it is. You know, often an opposition player that gets really that excited can be an irritant. He hasn't become at all. As you said, he's gained a bunch of fans, is really, really popular everywhere he goes now. And as you say, it was a coming out party for him. And he's taken that confidence into this year. And, I mean, I think there's big things coming from that guy as we move along.
And it looks like he's put on a little bit of weight throughout this season in a good way, trying to get longer, right? Like, I mean, not weight like you put on, but...
You know, it can work both ways. I put on weight and I got shorter. You were always just short, but anyway.
Well, he's putting on weight not by eating chicken wings, I think is my point. But so he wins Vegas. He strikes up a deal with Nike. He's starting to get fit. And one of the things about Tom Kim is that he's a great long iron player, but not necessarily, can compete off the tee with these guys. But I've noticed him at the U.S. Open and other weeks starting to get the ball out there 300 plus, which a young guy, you would think it's a must for him to start picking up that distance.
Yeah, very much so. And I couldn't agree more. You know, I got to watch him close up when I was in studio doing PGA Tour Live, and he's getting the ball out there. He's hitting it a lot further than he was, and he understood that he needed to compete. These guys that are not hitting it far, they maybe have 3 or 4 weeks where they can really compete. So he figured that out quickly, and he's a guy that's willing to put in the work as well.
And he's only 21 years old. You think what we were doing at 21, we weren't certainly at the peak of our athletic ability at that time. So it's pretty incredible what he's done. What other takeaways you have from the fall?
How well Seamus Power played. We saw him get that win in Bermuda, follow that up with a third and a fifth, and he was right up there at the top of the FedEx Cup rankings. And he's another guy. He validated that first win that he had got in Kentucky pretty quickly, and you can see that he's getting a lot more comfortable out there as well.
He came into that week, and Bermuda is the top-ranked player in that field, and I find it very impressive. I think he was in the low 60s, and I find it so impressive for a guy that's the top-ranked player in the field to perform as well as he did. And another week in the fall at the RSM, Brian Harmon, I think, was maybe 18th or 20th in the world. He was the top-ranked player in that event, ended up finishing second. So it's got to be a lot of pressure going into an event with that kind of expectation.
Yeah, and even more so for Harm, obviously being the hometown kid living there on Sea Island. Yeah, that was very impressive to see him compete there.
Tony Finau's win in Houston. It was a great fall. I think that designated event structure came out. And as we look into the beginning of 2023, Maui being a designated event, I mean, it's a great event, but now they're letting anybody that makes the top 30, it's not really the Tournament of Champions anymore. What do you think about that event?
I thought the fact that they made that a designated event was a travesty. I thought it was absolutely terrible. You've got a 39-man field, and you throw that designated event structure, a designated event label on that. I thought that was terrible.
Yeah, thinking next year if they actually go up in points almost to major championship thing, to think of a 39-man field getting that kind of points. But it did deliver a hell of a finish. I mean, Colin Morikawa kind of hadn't really been the same since then. You looking at him play those first 3 rounds, you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a breakout year for a guy that's already won 2 majors, but it hasn't panned out that way.
No, he had that 6-shot lead, and I mean, just absolutely fell apart. There's no other way you could put it there. I mean, essentially got the chipping yips on that grainy Bermuda, but as you say, hasn't been the same since. Hasn't been able to close the door on any tournaments.
And it was John Rahm had a nice success in the fall in the DP World Tour Championship. But then John Rahm coming back the way he did on that back 9 over Colin Morikawa really set him up for a West Coast that we hadn't really seen out of a guy how good he played this West Coast.
Yeah, his next event was the Amex, where he followed that up with another win, and just was on absolute fire there for the whole West Coast.
He was in the final group at Torrey Pines, which I know Max Homa, getting his 2nd win of the year, came back to beat him. He was in the final group with Scheffler and Nick Taylor at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which is where Scheffler kind of stamped his legacy on that event, and just a little preview as to how good a golf he was going to play. But and then Rahm would go on to win LA, which was a designated event. So how did those designated events on that West Coast feel to you, especially Phoenix and LA?
Listen, I think they produced great results. Now, would your fields have been that different if it hadn't been a designated event? It may be 1 or 2 players that you added to the mix. I totally understand why they're doing it. Everybody does want to see the best guys playing, but I still don't think that you need the best players to have a great tournament or have a great result.
Yeah, because with LA more so, the top guys always go to LA and play, but Phoenix, I thought it brought guys like McIlroy, Spieth, and guys that don't normally play Phoenix, because it's not everybody's cup of tea. I know personally one year I was in the 3rd to last group Saturday, and it was a nightmare. I didn't want to go back. Now I want to go back and be part of the crowd, but it's not everybody's cup of tea in Phoenix, and I thought that it delivered an incredible field and a wonderful environment at a place that didn't even really need that kind of field.
Yeah, Phoenix is, we've talked about this before. It's one of those weeks that's great for a week. You wouldn't want to do it the entire year. That would get old really, really quickly.
And I think we've talked at length about those designated events, but having a guy like Nick Taylor in that final group with the top 2 players in the world and going toe-to-toe really speaks to our point of feeling like these designated events being 70, 80-man fields next year are just a mistake. Well, Nick Taylor will be in them next year, but a guy like that, even Keith Mitchell in L.A., what were some of the feel-good stories for you on that West Coast?
Definitely Nick Taylor. That's the one that jumps to mind amongst all those big names battling them down the stretch. And as you say, if we eliminate those sort of guys, not a Nick Taylor, because as you say, he's played his way in next year, but we eliminate that sort of player from those, then that completely takes away that story. And we don't want to lose that Cinderella story in essence. Because
we know as players that are, mid-tier players, you were a President's Cup player, I would consider you way higher tier than me, but that's
the nicest thing you've ever said.
I mean, I'm trying to be nice. I'm going to set you up here for failure in a minute.
Well, I appreciate it.
But why is it we're the ones playing the pro-ams, we're the ones doing the dirty work, so to speak, with sponsor value stuff? I just feel like it just doesn't make sense. Like the World Golf Championship model failed. They had the 70 to 80 man fields, and you have guys that are guaranteed to make cuts that are just going to show up for the weekend for a check. And I love these stories, and we've had them time and time again. And I don't know. I'm trying to think. Keith Mitchell wouldn't have been in them. He had a great week in L.A.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other examples. And Kurt Kitayama at Bay Hill. He may have been. I don't think he was top 50 last year, but really close to being that guy.
Yeah.
Bay Hill was another one, just a fabulous, and it's weird to me, Bay Hill being a 120-man field. I was working opposite that week in Puerto Rico, and there were guys. I think 5 or 6 guys in the Puerto Rico field that ended up playing the Players Championship the very next week. So I think technically Bay Hill had a stronger field than the Players, which was a weird sort of sensation this year.
Yeah, you would think obviously the Players being the flagship event, you want that as the strongest field. But yeah, 120-man field, you could see how that would work out. But yeah, not what you'd expect.
And you had, I guess, maybe at the time, probably 25 live players that were in the top 100. The Players, if you're in the top 100 in the world, you're always in the Players. And so I think for me, that's why that field was so different.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you had those top 25 guys that just weren't there and playing. But Scotty Scheffler at the Players Championship.
That was, Scotty Scheffler, Players Championship and forward. I mean, it's just been a ball-striking exhibition. And listen, he is, as of right now, the undisputed world number one. He is the one that's brought that level of consistency above what I would call the big three at the moment. He has brought that level of consistency that the other two guys haven't, being Jon Rahm and Rory McIlroy. But yeah, just put on an absolute display at the Players.
What do you think makes Scotty such a good ball striker? Why has he been able to be so consistent for a year and a half, almost 2 years now? His ball striking has been next level. What is it about his game that speaks to you? I
think the fact that he has been willing to stay with the same coach, hasn't tinkered at all. Randy Smith obviously knows Scotty's game so well. Hasn't tinkered and believes in what he's doing. Obviously, you watch Scotty Scheffler play for the first time and you see these feet going all over the place. It wouldn't be the first thing you'd teach as a coach, but he trusts what he's doing. And I mean, obviously the proof is in the pudding right there.
And to me, you remember Mark Calcavecchia? He had that kind of right foot drag move. And you're not anymore a fader of the golf ball. Now you hit smother hooks that go about 210 in the air. But as a fader, when you were playing good golf, as a fader of the ball, did you ever kind of feel like your right foot could slip? And what is that? Like, that gets you just to your left side fully released?
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's a release cut, and that's what Scotty's hitting. You can see that there is no hang on there. It is a full release, and yeah, that gets you to a good finish.
And so we had some events in the Florida swing. I want to shout out Chris Kirk and the Honda Classic, and I'm so sad that one of the longest running sponsors of the PGA Tour is now gone because they weren't given that designated role, and they knew for 6-8 months that this was going to be the last time. But Chris Kirk, Eric Cole playoff at the Honda. Do you buy into anything that the tour is saying, is that having these shorter fields are going to lead to better non-designated events?
I see where they're coming from. I really do, but I don't like it. I really don't. I like the full field events. But yeah, as you say, talking about Chris Kirk, what a great story. Was very open about his troubles off the golf course. Took the necessary steps that he needed to, took care of himself, and great to see him back in the winner's circle, and what a great finish.
And a guy like in a day with technology that you can't really draw the ball consistently anymore. I think Kirk, I hate to even say the guy's name, but Bryson DeChambeau, those are the only two guys I can think of at the top of my head that can actually draw a driver these days.
Yeah, there's not many. I mean, even Rory McIlroy used to play that predominant right to left flight. That's kind of gone away now.
I mean, he's working it more both ways. But another non-designated event with a winner that I thought was impressive, Justin Rose at Pebble Beach. I thought coming back, hadn't won in 4+ years, really positioned himself to have a big role at the Ryder Cup this year.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we're saying, that you don't need to have these designated events to have great events and great results and great finishes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the media world, they look at a field like Pebble Beach or Honda, and they're like, oh, this is going to be a terrible week. But it's our job. Like, there are always good stories on the PGA Tour, and Chris Kirk's now, a 5-time winner?
Right.
And Justin Rose is a U.S. Open champ, a Ryder Cup hero, an Olympic gold medalist. Like, I love these non-designated events, and it's funny as we look forward, too, like how broken the designated event model is anyway, because none of the sponsors want to pony up for the cash to do it, and that's why the PGA Tour's forced to go down this road they're going down.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. There's still very fluid, obviously, the situation. There's going to be a lot of questions that are unanswered.
I think it's time to take a look at the Masters. This was the first year in a while you weren't there.
I wasn't there. Yeah, I've been the last 3 years. I was in England watching some soccer at the time, but great result. And we didn't really know what to expect. This was the live players coming back. What was their reception going to be like? And from what we heard, for the most part, it was all very, very civil. There was no unrest in that Champions champions dinner, and well, obviously Brooks Koepka fared really, really well. Took the 54-hole lead into Sunday, and well, he got pipped by Jon Rahm, who played some great golf.
I don't think anybody was really picking Jon Rahm after the West Coast he had. Opened up Bay Hill with like 7 under par and was leading Bay Hill. And then it seemed like from Bay Hill through the Players where he withdrew due to illness was kind of off the map going into that Masters. And he was and even double bogeyed his first hole.
Yeah.
Like, how often does a major champion double bogey their first hole and go on to win?
Yeah, I double bogeyed my first hole at the Masters. I didn't come back to win, but
you made the cut.
I did make the cut. Yeah, I think all the talk going into Augusta was McIlroy, right? It was all about, can Rory finally get that career Grand Slam, and I've got to put that down to one of the biggest disappointments of the year, the way he played at Augusta.
The way he played at Augusta, and we'll look more into him withdrawing from the RBC after he had already missed Kapalua, so he kind of thrown himself out of the player impact program. I think all of that now doesn't quite matter
right.
as much as it did. I think they're going to find a way to compensate him. But Rory was a disappointment. Jordan Spieth was a little bit of a disappointment at the Masters, but then Scottie Scheffler just continuing to put it on, and Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson both finishing second, kind of opened everybody's eyes to, okay, wait a second. These guys that are playing live can still compete in these majors, and you ended up calling Brooks's win at the PGA.
Yeah, but getting back to Augusta, it was a big unknown, right? Like, all we had seen these guys in passing with some shorts on playing 54-hole events. We didn't know how sharp their games were going to be, but we were a little quick to forget just how good some of these guys really are. Obviously Brooks Koepka is Major Brooks, right? So it was a sign of things to come.
And he won that week before on the Live Tour at a place you and I are very familiar with, Orange County National. Too many Q schools there.
Too many Q schools.
And not that that's the best prep for Augusta, but it was amazing. And once you saw him actually do something positive on the Live Tour, and he came in, his interviews pre-tournament at Augusta, he looked like the old Brooks, the confident Brooks, healthy, just a killer.
Yeah, I think it goes to prove that if you're playing good golf, it doesn't really matter where you're playing. You're going to bring confidence in, right? You're playing well at home. You go to a tournament, you feel confident.
And so, you ready to move past the Masters?
Yeah, I think so.
So we had the RBC Heritage, which was a designated event the week after, and I just felt like, for me, I was covering that event for Golf Channel in studio, and it just didn't feel like the other designated events did pre-major championship season. And we were delivered a great finish with Fitzpatrick and Spieth in a playoff, and I think by Sunday it had that feel. But and it's of my opinion that these designated events, once major season started, have just kind of steadily, at least from my interest perspective, has gone down dramatically.
I agree 100%. It felt like at the beginning of that week at RBC that a lot of guys didn't really want to be there. Like, this is what we've signed up for, but we don't really want to be here. We saw Jon Rahm really struggle that first round, and then he dug deep. He did. He dug deep to make the cut and actually turn it into a good week. But it was sluggish starting out that week. Really sluggish.
It was sluggish, and to look ahead to like the Wells Fargo as well, which is an event that I know we both love, important to us. It didn't have the feel either. You didn't have Scheffler. You didn't have Rahm. There was the top 2 players in the world weren't there. So it seems like these $20 million purses are great, but players don't necessarily care so much about the money as they do their schedule and setting themselves up for future events.
Yeah, I think guys ultimately still want to make sure that they're peaking in the majors, and they're going to set their schedule as such. And, whether that means having to take off an event or, in McIlroy's case, having to pay a penalty in essence, again, we'll see how that pans out. But, yeah, I think these guys want to peak for those 4 weeks, and they're still going to do what it takes.
Right, because Scheffler took off Wells. He is from Dallas, so he played Dallas, PGA Championship, and Colonial. And I just wonder going forward how the tour is going to set this schedule up to entice players to want to come play these big purses. Because I remember back when we were playing, a tournament director would complain about how the tour makes them bump their purses up every year. And he came, I don't remember the exact tournament director, but he came up to me. He said, "Do you have any idea what the purse is this week?" I was like, "I don't know, $6 million." He's like, $7.5 million.
Yeah.
To my point, it was to his point that players don't really pay attention to the size of the purse that much. And I think as these designated events become the norm, we're going to see more and more guys taking them off because either they don't like the course or they don't fit into their schedule.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You can't offer these guys enough money right now to make them want to go and play. It's not going to happen. And I mean, first thing is, if I was one of these designated events, I don't want to be the week after a major.
No, and we just saw it with the Travelers Championship. We saw it with RBC, Travelers, and what's after the Open Championship? I think is Wyndham maybe, so or 3M. So it's that's not designated, but they've got to get that figured out. Would rather have a designated event leading into a major so guys can play their way into form. The week after is just not going to be something that guys buy into. You spend all your energy getting ready, and there's just no chance that you're going to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's these guys will not be playing the weeks after majors. That guys just don't want to play. We saw it with RBC, and as you say, we saw it with the Travelers last week.
Yeah, and I didn't. I mean, I watched a little bit Sunday of the Travelers, but it just did not. I love that event, but you see the scores guys are shooting, and it just didn't bring it to me. We had some news come out mid-season about USGA rolling back the golf ball, and personally for me, I'm fine with it. And after watching the U.S. Open at LACC and I know the fairways were firm, but it wasn't super hot. The distances these guys are hitting, like where's your stance on the rollback and whether it should be across all of golf or anything?
I'm for it. I really am. I agree with you. Well, we saw it last week with Travelers. It's making a lot of golf courses obsolete. We heard McIlroy talk about it. The golf ball is just going too far. Now, listen, these guys are still going to figure out how to get it out there, but there needs to be something done. It's going to eliminate so many golf courses if we keep going the way that we are.
Yeah, and Travelers is a perfect example. They were innovative back in 2015, I believe. They took ShotLink data from the previous 10 years and kind of redesigned the golf course, moving bunkers in certain places that they thought were not going to be carryable. And then now on 18 at Travelers, you see guys like Rory and all the bombers just sending it down there and flipping little wedges into what used to be a long, brutal par 4.
Yeah, I watched McIlroy hit some kind of heel cut out there, and it flew the bunker by 30 yards down that right side. It's absolutely ridiculous how far they're hitting it.
Let's talk about the PGA Championship for a little bit. Golf course. I was there doing radio that week, and I walked the inside the rope set. I had to be within an arm length of the rope line, and so I walked Thursday or Friday, and my legs have never been so tired. The rough was the real deal out there. Did that feel more like a U.S. Open to you this year than LACC did?
Yeah, very much so. It was essentially a U.S. Open setup with that rough. It was hack out rough. There were some almost impossible par 4s out there. I think it was the 6th hole that averaged 4.7 for a while. The way they set that golf course up, it felt just like a U.S. Open. And getting to the U.S. Open, I wanted to ask you. You were obviously out at LACC. Did that feel like a U.S. Open?
It didn't. I was out there Monday afternoon and took a ride around the golf course, walked around a little bit, and there was not a soul. Now, it was late afternoon on a Monday, but U.S. Opens, I mean, it's packed wall to wall with people. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, it picked up a little bit. The golf course itself, I was looking so forward to seeing it. And I thought the golf course showed out well. I think maybe some setup stuff. They could have narrowed some fairways and could have gotten it firmer. They hadn't had rain in a long time. And so I think the USGA maybe was a little bit cautious leading into that event. And I almost think that, I mean, you know how much players complain about USGA setups, and I think they've almost gone the other direction and are placating to the top players so much. Don't want players to get mad at the USGA. They got all this rollback discussion that players are not hating. So I think they're being too kind to PGA Tour players, because I want a US Open to be bad. I want it to be tough. I want 2 under par winning, and I just don't know that there's a way to set up places to make it that hard.
Yeah, I agree with you to an extent. And I think, yes, you do want your scores there, but you don't want to set it up gimmicky to get to that. And I feel like the USGA, for a period there, they set up the golf courses with gimmicks, be it holes on slopes or whatever it might be, to get to that certain score that they'd set it. You don't ever want it to get to that. Now, I got no problem with them not watering the greens, for maybe a couple days, even if that's what it takes to get the greens like this.
Right.
But you hate to see them gimmick guys.
Shinnecock. And Shinnecock come both the last couple times it's been at Shinnecock. It has just been an absolute nightmare on one of the most classic golf courses. And I don't know if that's members not wanting the scores to be too low or whatever it is. And I think I do think it is nice. There is a balance to be found, and I think they're trying to strike that balance. They hired Jason Gore years ago, and now he's with the tour, but Scott Langley's there, and I think they're helping sort of rebrand the USGA's identity, and then it doesn't have to be an even par winning score.
Yeah, and I guess my point there was that it was easy to see how they were a little bit gun shy and went the other way with it, right? Didn't want to hear the complaining, didn't want to hear,
They're still complaining.
Oh, there's always going to be complaining. We're golfers, right? It's part of it.
Leading into the U.S. Open, Canadian Open week, we had that sort of PIF, Public Investment Fund Tour partnership. I mean, what are your thoughts there, and how do you feel like that's going to shake out going forward?
I think we all thought it was going to happen at some point, and if anybody says they saw it happening this quickly, they're lying. It was a big bomb that got dropped. Nobody figured that it was going to happen this quickly. Obviously, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff that still needs to be ironed out. I would love to be a fly on the wall to hear all those conversations and hear what's going on. But that was a major bombshell that got dropped.
And I just wonder, with none of the sponsors necessarily, they want to be designated. They just don't want to pony up the extra, $8-10 million that it's going to need to. And now there was just a player meeting last week at Travelers, and they kind of came up with the set in stone. Any of the invitationals are still going to be 70 to 80 man fields, but with a cut down to like 45 or 50. I just don't think that the tour is really looking to their sponsors, because a lot of those events, they want full fields. That's how you get hospitality. That's how you get hospitality venues. That's how you get more people playing Monday Pro-Ams, which drives a ton of revenue for those events and for the charity. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, if this new company that the PGA Tour and PIF are trying to set up, like how are they going to feed money into the nonprofit aspect of the PGA Tour without necessarily having Aramco be the sponsor of all these events?
Yeah. No, and right, to get to your point, you want people out there, you want people around the golf course for as long as possible. Now you've cut it to 40, 45 guys on the weekend. Well, you're only going to have so many tee times, and people aren't going to be around all day spending money on beer, spending money on hospitality, and I don't like it. I don't like that model at all.
It's so confusing. It seems like every decision that's been made has gone towards more of that live model with smaller fields. And it's as much as the tours put their foot in their mouth, I think that they're basically realizing, well, maybe our model that we've had working for 60, 70 years, maybe it isn't the model. Maybe we have to transition to this new one. But it's going to be weird seeing the DP World Tour has taken a hit this year.
Yeah.
The Rolex Series went from maybe 8 events last year down to 4, and 3 of them were already played in the Middle East. And I'm feeling really bad for that DP World Tour.
Yeah, they kind of feel like they've been thrown in a blender. They don't really know which direction they're going. Do they partner here? Do they partner here? They doesn't really have an identity at the moment. We'll see going forward if some things are going to change. But yeah, I agree. I think they have been hit the hardest right now.
Because all their top players, they don't. If you watch a regular DP World Tour event, you're not getting McIlroy once a month like you used to, or a Rahm even. They're playing their national opens, and then maybe a couple of these Rolex events. I don't think they necessarily have to play 11 events anymore to even keep their membership.
Maybe Scotland just to get ready for the Open, maybe get a little links feel. But yeah, other than that, I agree. They're not over there playing, and it used to be you could turn it on, and one of those guys would be over there once a month, maybe a couple times a month playing.
And do you think I've been kind of thinking about a potential sort of if this designated event thing, and if they created sort of this global world tour, do you see any way that the PGA Tour lower end stuff and the DP World Tour could sort of merge and have a secondary global tour? Do you see golf headed that way, or do you think it's going to remain sort of US based?
It does feel like that would work. I think if you take, obviously, the top players on the DP World Tour and then essentially the second tier on the PGA Tour, you would have a very, very strong tour there. And I do think that would work. I have no idea if that is even in the mix as far as being talked about. You'd probably know more about that than I do. But I do think that would work.
Well, I mean, with Barracuda and Barbasol both being co-sanctioned, as well as the Scottish Open. I think they're dipping their toe into the water. I think it would be nice, and I've often thought too, the DP World Tour is getting 10 spots over to the PGA Tour next year. Q School's only getting 5 spots. I think our PGA Tour Q School should have at least the next 10 guys be able to go and have the opportunity to go play in Europe if they wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine if you were 22 years old, you just missed your card at Q School? Wouldn't you love the opportunity to go play in Europe for a year?
Oh, like a Brooks Koepka did it. Peter Uihlein did it.
Yeah,
those guys,
Adam Scott.
Adam Scott did it. Those guys came out ready. Ernie Els, Nick Price. A lot of guys have done that. Started in Europe and then made their way to the States. And I think that would be a great pathway.
And it has not been a very common path. I think maybe Dylan Wu maybe played over there for a couple of years, but it's not something that players have been doing a lot. So this year, obviously, we've had some dominant players with Scotty Scheffler and John Rahm. But who are some surprise players to you this year that you did not expect to break out in a way that they have?
Eric Cole would definitely be one. I know, obviously, we'll probably talk about Rookie of the Year later, but he would definitely be one. 35-year-old rookie.
You want to go ahead and talk about Rookie of the
Year
Year right
now? Yeah, we might as
now.
well. Right, we're there. 35-year-old rookie, not your typical rookie right out of there. I have heard he's a bit of a legend on the mini tours down in Florida, which shows good golf breeds to good golf. But yeah, he would be one, and he seems to be popping up a lot more frequently on leaderboards as well now.
In big events as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he was up there. His name was up near the top at the U.S. Open for a while.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Who else do you like for Rookie of the Year if it's not Eric Cole?
Thomas Dietrich, but as we were talking earlier, is he really a rookie? I know technically he is, but he's been around for a while. But his name was one that you'd have to throw in there. Who else?
Taylor Montgomery, who had
Yeah.
an outstanding start to his season in the fall. I don't think he finished outside the top 15 basically through his first 8 or 9 starts, but he's definitely cooled off as of late.
Yeah, he came out all guns blazing. You're right there. I think he was top 15, 5 events in a row, and he must have thought the PGA Tour was pretty easy at the time.
And then it started kicking back on him. We haven't had a winner that's a rookie yet this year, have we?
Nico Echevarria
That's right.
in Puerto Rico. That's the only one, but I think he followed that with a bunch of miscuts.
Yeah, he hasn't done enough. I know a win obviously goes a long way, but if I had to pick right now, I think it would be Eric Cole would be my Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Over $3 million in earnings already. Yeah, he's got to be the front runner at the moment. Obviously, there are still some opportunities for these rookies to get a win now with these events coming up.
Yeah, the summertime schedule gets a little bit different. And as we look at the playoff structure going forward, we start with 70 and then to 50 and then to 30. And obviously 70 and 50 are huge numbers. I would say arguably, top 30 is always big because it gets you in the majors, and now it gets you in Maui if you haven't won. But as we look at it was 125 guys made the playoffs before. So do you think that some fields like John Deere, Rocket Mortgage this week, 3M, some fields that have traditionally been weaker, do you think they're going to get a little bump in their field strength just because guys are on the outside looking in?
Yeah, very much so. I think you're going to start seeing a few big names that haven't had the kind of season that they were hoping for. I think you're going to start seeing those guys that'll add a John Deere or a 3M, whatever. And I think they're in a good spot for that, for helping their fields.
Because Wyndham, I think the Wyndham Championship over the last decade has really been in a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And now even more so, Wyndham's going to get everybody playing that's not, even they'll get guys that are kind of on that 49 to 51 bubble, because if you can have a nice finish, that you just set yourself up better for success in that first playoff event. Do you like this new playoff structure?
I actually do. Everything we've said has been opposed to smaller fields, but I do. I think, again, football, how many teams make the playoffs? Now, obviously, basketball, too many teams make the playoffs, whatever. But say football, it's the best of the best, and I like the fact now that we're starting at 70. I think that's great, and you've had to have had a really good year. You could have had a very mediocre year and snuck into that top 120, right?
And then go finish third, and then all of a sudden you're making the Tour Championship.
Yeah, that was a
when
mess.
this is definitely a better judge of a season throughout. Because if you're top 70 and you play that first playoff event, you've got to like your chances of making it to the top 30. If you just go play well 2 weeks, you're going to be in that top 30. And like you said, football, 16 teams make the playoffs? Or maybe it's more now because they have that extra wild card game. But it's not the entire – it's like just to keep your job doesn't mean you get the playoffs. And the way they've structured the fall going forward too, I think it brings back more of like our first few years on tour where the playoffs ended, but then you play the fall to see who keeps their job for next year.
Yeah, I like that. I do. I like what they've done there. Of all the changes, I feel like that's probably the best one they've made.
I would agree with that. And I think as we look to potential PGA Tour partnerships, I'm of the belief that Liv is going to fold at some point. If they don't play in 24, I think it won't be there in 25. And I think we'll start seeing, I'm calling it the Aramco Team Series in the fall, that can be for those top 70 guys that make the playoffs that don't have to play the fall on the PGA Tour. Maybe there's some sort of team format, 4 or 5 events, a couple in the U.S., a couple globally. I mean, that would be something if you were top 70 in the world and could go play a team event for $20+ million. Would that be something you would have been interested in?
Oh, in a heartbeat, for so many different reasons. I love the team aspect of it. I think that is such a great initiative, and I think that would be so much fun. I think people would get behind that. People would enjoy to watch something like that.
How do you create the teams? How do you make the teams interesting, though? To where I would want to root for a team of guys because they all have this in common, or they're just my favorite players. How are the teams?
Well, honestly, I think Liv have done a pretty good job of making the teams interesting. You know, you got your 4 South Africans, you've got your 4 Aussies. I think that kind of makes the teams interesting and makes it easy to get behind a team and pull for them.
Like the Spanish-speaking teams as well, with Sergio and Sebastian Munoz and Ortiz and Are they on the team together?
Yeah. And I think that makes it fun, and I think it would be easy for people to get behind that.
I mean, I would love a team, even if they were 3-man teams. Think about like a Seamus Power, Rory McIlroy, Shane Lowry team. Like that would be. I mean, I like all those guys anyway. I'm not Irish, but I would root for them.
And they got to drink 5 Guinness on the first tee before they go. It'd be great. But I think there are many ways, and I think, again, it's very, very fluid. There's going to be a lot of ideas that get thrown out there.
There are. It's a crazy time thinking about how much is going on in the game of golf and how fast everything's changed in the last year and a half, 2 years with all this money coming in. And but who's your player of the year right now?
It's got to be Jon Rahm. It has to be. Purely the fact that he's won 4 times. Nobody else has won more than twice. I see you sitting back there like you're going to say something profound.
I would agree. If I had to vote today, it would be Jon Rahm.
I don't think it can be anybody else. 4 wins as opposed to 2, including a major.
Scotty Scheffler has made $2 million more money than he has. He hasn't finished outside the top 12 in the calendar year of 2023. He's been there every single week he's played.
If you offered Scotty Scheffler Jon Rahm's year, do you think he would take it?
Yes, he would take the wins in the major for sure. For sure. That's a great point. What does Scotty have to do to, we've still got 1 major left. We've got the playoffs. I mean, if he were to not win the Open but win the FedEx Cup, does that jump him forward, or does he have to win that Open Championship?
If he won the FedEx, I think that would close the gap. I still don't think that would give him Player of the Year, but I'll throw Wyndham Clark's name in there. Now, if Wyndham Clark wins the Open, 2 majors plus a designated event, does that make you start thinking there? 2 majors in a year? That doesn't happen very often.
And that was my next question, was if it's not Rahm or Scheffler, who would it be? And it's weird how we think, but I would not have thought about Wyndham Clark there. And going back to some surprise players, a guy like Wyndham Clark, he was playing in Puerto Rico. He was playing in the Dominican Republic, had a good chance to win in the Dominican. And people love to dog on these opposite field events, but they're crucial. A guy like Nick Taylor got his first win in Sanderson when it was an opposite field event, and they're important. And I think Wyndham put himself in contention there in the Dominican, and I think he learned a lot from that going forward that he took to the Wells Fargo.
Yeah, and I know you think very strongly about this. You defended the Mules, as they were called. You came to their defense, and I couldn't agree more that it's so important. It's such an important stepping stone. If Wyndham Clark doesn't have a really good chance to win there at Corrales in the Dominican, Does he get it done at Wyndham? At Wells.
And if he doesn't get it done at Wells, certainly he's not going to be able to close the deal the way he did at the U.S. Open. It was some of the most baller short game shots on 11, the up and down on Sunday.
Unbelievable.
And then on 17, granted, he had a nice lie and a little bit of green to work with, but he's got a one-shot lead in the U.S. Open over Rory McIlroy on the 71st hole, and he chipped it to 4 inches.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If he doesn't do what he did at Wells, it's not so easy for him to close that out. He made it look like he'd been there many, many times.
He really did. And when things got a little shaky, even on 16, he hit it in that fairway bunker and then laid it up, hit it a great wedge, and pretty much should have made that putt. But for me, and tell me if you disagree, Nick Taylor winning the Canadian Open may have been the greatest win I've ever seen in my life. Did you watch the playoff?
I did watch the playoff. I don't know if it would be the greatest win I've ever seen in my entire life, but it's definitely the story of the year for me.
Okay, I'll take that.
Watching him make a 70-foot putt in your National Open with every single Canadian standing behind the green watching your good buddy get laid out as he comes to spray you with champagne.
He was full cork. It was about to just explode all over Nick Taylor.
It makes me wish I'd won more so you could have run on the green and got laid out by someone.
Have you won? You said one more.
I did win on the nation.
That's true. The Xerox Open in Irondequoit, if I recall,
right.
2008. Is that right?
Sounds about right.
But he made putts on 17 and 18 in regulation. The crowds on TV, it was a hilly place, and they were down right of the 18th fairway. I couldn't believe the amount of support he had and that the vibe of that playoff. And then it started raining, and the putts both Fleetwood and he made. Tommy Fleetwood's another guy. Is it surprising to you that he hasn't won a golf tournament yet on the PGA Tour? I mean, he's won 5 times in Europe, I believe.
Yeah, very, very surprising. I mean, obviously he's getting closer and closer. Had his opportunities there in Canada to win in regulation. But yeah, I think Tommy's one of those guys that he's going to win, and he's going to win a bunch.
And he's got after this year's U.S. Open, he's got 2 63s on Sundays in U.S. Opens, tied with only Johnny Miller for lowest final rounds of U.S. Open. Absolutely shocking, the kind of stuff he has. All right, Brendon, it's time for our Ryder Cup teams.
All right.
How you want to do this? Do you want me to start with some American players?
Yeah, let's talk about an American team, and then I'll tell you where you're wrong, and then we'll go from there.
I'm sure you. All right, I'm going to go number 1, Scotty Scheffler. Got to be. Scotty is a lock. He's first in the running. I'm going to give my locks here first. So Scotty, I believe Wyndham Clark's second right now on the list. So I'm going to take him as well. And Brooks Koepka, your boy, is 3. I don't see any way he's off of that team.
I think Zach Johnson's got to be one of those guys that was pretty happy when this merger as such went down.
It didn't even have to. It's not even a question. Brooks Koepka is going to be on that team.
Yeah.
I think he's a lock. I think he's just on the outside looking in. But there's no way Jordan Spieth is not going to be on that team.
Well, of course you would pick Jordan Spieth.
Well, I mean he's 4. I didn't pick him 1. Another one I think is a lock. He has not played great really since the West Coast. But I think Max Homa is going to be on that team. Yeah. I think he drives the ball well. I think this golf course over there in Italy is a very difficult driving test.
I think he's currently inside that top 6, right at 6th.
I think Justin Thomas, again, as bad as he's played, I think Justin Thomas has got to be on that team. Pairs too well with Jordan Spieth.
Yeah.
And then we got to go Cantlay and Xander are also definitely going to be on the team. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 8 right there. And this is where this is where it gets interesting for me. Do you have a problem with any of these guys being on the team?
No, so
guaranteed.
far so good. Yeah.
I think Cam Young has not played that great so far. So I'm gonna be sort of kind of. He may be my 12th pick, but I'm struggling from here. I think Harris English has started playing a lot better, and he was really good on that team back. Sam Burns, I'm going to put Sam Burns on there. Sam has not played great, but I think he is another one of those guys that can pair with anybody. You got anybody to add to me here that you think's a lock?
Keegan Bradley's got to be a lock now.
That's a great call.
Two wins on the year.
Yeah, that's 10. Keegan's got to be a lock. I agree with you. And he's got Ryder Cup experience. He teamed with multiple Ryder Cups, and he and Phil Mickelson had great success. So we got 2 spots left.
Well, I mean, Ricky Fowler has been playing some really, really good golf.
Love it. And like talk about a guy that's great in the team room.
Yes.
Everybody would love to play with Ricky. All right, Ricky.
Now, I would put Dustin Johnson as my 12th pick. I don't think you can go into this with your strongest 12 and not include Dustin Johnson in there.
And I like that argument. And I probably would take him over. I would probably take him over Cam Young right now. Cam's not
100%.
showing it to me. He seems very frustrated. He has not won yet, which I think is, as he goes on, I mean, obviously this is only his second year on tour, but until he shows me that he can win, and he may go ahead and do it. He may do it in a major way here at Hoylake in a couple of weeks, but until he can give me that, I'm leaving him off there. I'm not going to argue with Dustin, especially now. And he started playing better at the U.S. Open. I think a lot depends with Dustin how he does at the Open Championship. But I like that. I like him over Cam Young. That's a solid team. I don't see anybody beating him. Like, let's get to your Euro team here.
But a few more Americans now, the guys that are missing out. Like, what about a Tony Finau?
How do you leave Tony Finau off
Right.
the team? He's won twice this year.
Yep.
Jeez. Do your research, Johnson.
It's an absolutely stacked team any way you look at it.
Do you got anybody other than Tony? Tony's got to be on that team.
Colin Morikawa's name's in there.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. And?
Well, you said Harris English earlier.
Yeah.
I think Harris is starting to play some really good golf. So now you've got 16 and you got to figure 12 out of that.
Do you like the way we're set up now with 6 automatic bids, 6 captain's picks? I mean, I think it makes the captain's picks. I think it makes the captain's job so much tougher having so many picks. I guess you could argue either side of that. I mean, I would just rather, and maybe he will just go down to the top 8 or 9 guys and then have theoretically just 3 picks.
Yeah, I think so, but I think it's one of those things where you've got to look at form a little bit. So if you've said there Cam Young, not in the greatest of form. If Cam Young is maybe 8th, I don't see him getting picked. I would see him getting bypassed.
Because most of his points come from his great play of the majors last year.
That's right.
And a guy like Max Homa, who has done nothing in majors and is still that high on the list, I think that speaks to how consistent his play has been most of this season.
Yeah. No, listen, I think any way it stacks up, the top 12 Americans is going to be so strong. Now, can they go to Rome and win on the road? Who knows?
Well, who are they going to be playing?
Well, that's the thing. They're going to be playing a bunch of young guys. Obviously, now Sergio has withdrawn his membership,
which is a big deal for that, because the European to be on the European team, you have to be a member of the DP World Tour.
That's right, and they don't have that option of obviously we see there Brooks and DJ's names both in their 2 live guys. The live guys, the Europeans, all withdrew their membership, so they don't have the option of picking those guys. Luke Donald doesn't have the option of picking those guys, so they're going to be severely depleted. But at the top, obviously, really, really strong. John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry.
You think he's a lock?
Yes. Experience, great in the team room.
Okay.
I think you need some experience because there are going to be a bunch of rookies on there. Tyrrell Hatton.
Yep.
I'm trying to think who else is. I've got a few names written down. Justin Rose.
Yeah, Rosie's got to be a lock.
Right.
He's won this year. You talk about the experience you need because you are going to have so many young players.
And then we start looking at guys that will be rookies. Sepp Straka.
Okay, I'm going to put him over here on the side. But I like Sepp. I like his game. Drives it long, straight, good fit for that golf course.
Seamus Power.
Love that too. And they both played in that back in the spring. They both played in that sort of lead-in GB and I versus Continental Europe thing. Yeah. And they both played well.
Matthew Fitzpatrick, obviously a lock. One that we forgot there. But then after that, there's a couple names that people might not really have heard of.
Let's hear them.
There's this guy, Yannick Paul, is 3rd on the European points list. German guy.
Yep. I'd like to play him.
I would too. Adrian Meronk.
I think Meronk's a lock. I think Meronk has played so well. Polish sensation. I love Meronk.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's one of those guys that is a lock, but still will be a rookie on that team. Pablo Larrazabal.
Is that the guy from Coastal Carolina?
I cannot stop thinking of that guy drop kicking that flag.
It's the guy, right?
Same guy, yeah.
Is he going to make the Ryder Cup team?
He's certainly on that list right now.
Okay. That was incredible. Grand Dunes, 2002. Just he put his clubs back in the cart, came back out onto the green, and like Bruce Lee'd the flagstick out
of the hole and didn't even damage the cup.
Were you playing in the group with him?
I was playing behind him.
I feel like I was playing, but maybe I just know the story so well. I know I saw it with my eyes.
Well, they'd walked off the green, and I had my tee in the ground getting ready to hit. And he came back running. I thought he'd left a club. He drop kicked the flag out of the hole. Didn't damage the hole at all.
It's
impressive.
Showed a lot of restraint there.
Right. That's
the kind of fire you need on a team.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we should share that story with Captain Luke.
Yeah, maybe so. Adrian Otegui, another Spanish guy, playing really well as of late.
Okay.
Obviously, as we jot these names down on paper, it doesn't look like a really fair fight.
Well, I'm gonna throw. I think you have to have an Italian on that team. I think to get the. I mean,
where are you going to find an Italian to put on that team?
Well, Guido Migliozzi had a nice year last year. Has not done much this year, which has been a bit unfortunate. But you got to put Molinari on there. One of them. They have to. Either Eduardo or Francesco. I know Francesco is already, or is Eduardo an assistant captain? One of them's been named assistant captain. You have to put Francesco on that team. He's an Open champion. I just feel like he's got to be there. You disagree?
Yes, completely.
Okay.
He hasn't shown anything that says his game's going to stand up to Ryder Cup pressures right now. I understand where you're coming from, but I couldn't agree less.
What about you got all this young talent? I think there's a world beater out there who just won the PGA Tour U standings in Ludwig Aberg. What do you think about taking a shot on a guy like that, knowing you're overmatched? Like, let's get this young stud some Ryder Cup experience.
I would take him way before I'd take Francesco Molinari.
Okay.
And I do. I think he is a world beater in the makings for sure. And maybe that's the way to blood somebody. I mean, you go and play in a Ryder Cup and say you perform even half decently, any kind of pressure after that is going to feel really, really easy.
In my last ones that I'll throw out there, what about the Højgaard twins, Nikolai and
Rasmus? Rasmus is pretty high on that the European list right now. I believe inside that top 10. So he might be a guy. Now, obviously, there's still some time for these guys. The Open Championship is going to go a long way to determining who makes that European Ryder Cup team.
Well, I'm going to give our Ryder Cup teams an A+ on both sides, and I think that it's an 80% advantage. I think the U.S. is plus 400 right now.
I tend to agree with you there on paper for sure. Now, obviously, again, this golf course is going to get set up as much as they possibly can to help the European tour, but I think the Americans are a big favorite.
Which is they kind of always are anyway, so we'll have to see. Brendon, great show. Thank
Johnson,
you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoyed it.
You the man.